Daenerys Targaryen is undoubtedly one of the most popular characters of the current generation, the face of the Game of Thrones franchise, and one of, if not the most popular character from the show and the books alike. People name their children, pets, and businesses after her. She has fashion items designed after her. Jay-Z bought Beyoncé her dragon egg props from the show. A spin-off about her family was thus far the only one accepted by HBO in hopes of saving the franchise after a disastrous finale. Her character assassination was, in fact, one of the main reasons why the finale was accepted so poorly in the first place. Yet ever since Daenerys first graced the pages of A Song of Ice and Fire and the screens of HBO's hit series, she had dedicated and relentless haters, hell-bent on misrepresenting her character, spreading lies about her and painting her in the worst possible light. Unfortunately, the lies about her are as prevalent as love for her, and her fans need to battle these misconceptions on a daily basis. Her anti-fans are as dedicated as her fans. So I took it upon myself to gather as many arguments used by them and I will debunk them. This video is going to be divided into 3 parts encompassing 3 main aspects of Dany's character and arguments that are related to those specific contexts. Before we start, remember that if you like my content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. There is no way for me to gather all the arguments against Daenerys, so if I miss any, feel free to point them out in the comments.
Daenerys' campaign in Flavors Bay comes out of nowhere and is just there as filler.
This is a pretty common argument that I saw on various forums and it always baffled me because Dany's actions in Flavors Bay are not only a logical conclusion to her personality and values, but also because she experienced slavery herself. The issue of slavery is introduced in Dany's very first chapter in A Game of Thrones. Illyria's servants entered, bowed, and set about their business. They were slaves, a gift from one of the Magister's many Dothraki friends. There was no slavery in the free city of Pentos. Nonetheless, they were slaves. Dany isn't given enough credit for being so perceptive at such a young age. Pentos technically outlawed slavery after pressure from Bravos, but what they actually did was to call their slaves servants. They even kept their collars. One of the slaves talks to Dany about Khal Drogo. The girl scrubbed her back and her feet and told her how lucky she was. Drogo is so rich that even his slaves wear golden collars. 100,000 men ride in his kalasar, and his palace in Vaes Dothrak has 200 rooms and doors of solid silver. The girl slid the gilded sandals onto her feet, while the old woman fixed the tiara in her hair and slid golden bracelets crusted with amethysts around her wrists. Last of all came the collar, a heavy golden tor emblazoned with ancient Valyrian glyphs. "Now you look all a princess," the girl said breathlessly when they were done. Dany glanced at her image in the silvered looking glass that Illyrio had so thoughtfully provided. A princess, she thought. But she remembered what the girl had said, how Khal Drogo was so rich, even his slaves wore golden collars. She felt a sudden chill, and gooseflesh pimpled her bare arms. This is a very explicit imagery. Dany wears a slave collar and is about to be sold to Drogo, which the text acknowledges as purchased several times, even in the following books. Dany is therefore a bridal slave, and her campaign comes from the empathy she has for the slaves, having experienced slavery herself.
Daenerys' actions in Flavors Bay are imperialistic or colonialist in nature and can be compared to US invasion of Iraq.
If you watched my video about whether the conquest of Westeros by House Targaryen was colonial in nature, you can probably already call bullshit on this argument, but why not go over this again? Colonialism is a polity of acquiring partial or full control over one entity on behalf of another in order to engage in economic plunder. As such, Dany would have to start her campaign from the place of economic incentive and perform it on behalf of another empire. Dany doesn't do either of these things. She does not conquer Flavors Bay in order to facilitate economic exploitation on behalf of Westeros, Valyria, or anything else. She does this solely in order to end slavery. She does not use slavery as a justification to plunder Flavors Bay either. She genuinely wishes to end that institution. The Iraq War argument is an interesting one. Daenerys was likened to the invasion of Iraq by a certain creator who himself was a US Army soldier who participated in the occupation of Afghanistan. It stems from a premise that maybe Dany had good intentions, but she fumbled the execution, and that the case of the US was the same. They wanted to do something good but failed. The reality is that the US never had good intentions in Iraq, and it's pretty naive to believe this. While Saddam Hussein was indeed a genocidal dictator, that did not stop the US from backing him when it was convenient for them. Believe it or not. But at the time when Saddam was gassing the Kurds, he was actually backed by the US. When he was however no longer useful, a war was launched under a false pretext of getting rid of him, while the reality was that they simply wanted easy access to Iraq's oil. The death toll of this endeavor is staggering. 1 million deaths from the invasion alone, and even more due to refugee crisis, starvation and disease, not to mention things like the rise of ISIS and the destabilization of the entire region. If you liken Daenerys to the US in Iraq, then you end up validating US imperial lies and its effort to validate the invasion. And it's honestly not surprising that a colonial US soldier would have an incentive to peddle such a narration to validate his own actions.
Daenerys is a slaver, slave owner, profits off of slavery.
This relies on some mental gymnastics about how supposedly Dany owns Unsullied as slaves, she owns Irri and Jiqui, she owns Missandei, she owns the hostages she took in Meereen, she owns Doria, she owned Miri, and she was an equal co-owner of all of Drogo's slaves. It's apparently of no consequence that Dany is explicitly considered to have been sold to Drogo as a bridal slave, which is acknowledged by Jorah and by herself, even if she falls in love with her owner. Dany is 13 when this happens and has no choice in the matter. All of the power she has derives from Drogo, and when that power is taken away from her when he dies, she loses everything and only Jorah's protection saves her. If someone in earnest argues that Daenerys, who was sold and is 14 when her owner dies, who was raped nightly by her owner to the point that she considered suicide, is in any way, shape or form a slave owner, he or she is a vile misogynist and a vile slavery apologist. But slavery apologia is a recurrent theme among these arguments, it must be said. We will run into many more examples of this as we go further. By the end of A Game of Thrones, Dany frees Drogo's remaining slaves and gives them an opportunity to leave if they so choose. Doria, Jiquin and Irri all stay. You will be my Khalasar, she told them. I see the faces of slaves. I free you. Take off your collars. Go if you wish. No one shall harm you. If you stay, it will be as brothers and sisters, husbands and wives. Later they become loyal to her the way they have never been loyal to Drogo. They choose to stay and choose to follow Dany. When Krasnys Monaclos gives her Missandei, the first thing she does is to free her and offer her to go home if she so wishes, and it is Missandei's choice to stay by her side. Missandei is no longer a slave. I free you, from this instant. Come ride with me in the litter. I wish to talk. Rakaro helped them in, and Dany drew the curtains shut against the dust and heat. If you stay with me, you will serve as one of my handmaids, she said as they set off. I shall keep you by my side to speak for me, as you spoke for Krasnys. But you may leave my service whenever you choose. If you have father or mother, you would sooner return to. This one will stay, the girl said. This one, there's no place for me to go. I will serve you, gladly. Dany does not purchase Unsullied, nor does she own them. Instead, she kills their owner, and they choose loyalty to her on their own volition. Grey Worm is so grateful to her that he keeps the name he had the day he was freed by her, considering it to be lucky. Oh, but she does not pay them. And do the feudal lords of Westeros pay their knights and peasants they take to war? Is Robb Stark a slaver then? Robert Baratheon? Ned Stark? Let's stay consistent. If Dany is a slaver for not paying the Unsullied, then so are all the Westerosi lords who ever went to war. This presumption, as usual, relies on applying completely different moral standards to Dany as opposed to everyone else. Hello, this is Phoenix from the future. As I was editing this, I realized something so important that I decided that it's worth destroying my entire Sony Vegas project. Because Dany actually pays the Unsullied. In A Dance with Dragons, we learned that Stalwart Shield was paying women in the brothels to hold him. So he had money. Additionally, Eladon Golden Hair and Loyal Spear were poisoned at a wine shop. So they needed to have money to purchase the wine. So yes, Dany very much pays the Unsullied. Case closed. If one argues that Irri and Jiqui remain slaves to Dany in all but name in spite of her freeing them because they are her handmaids, does that mean that Shae is Sansa's slave? And if she is a slaver or a slave owner, why is she so hated by the slaving elite and loved by the freedmen? Surely, if that was the case, it would be the other way around. Sweet Kabbalah. If even half the stories coming back from Slaver's Bay are true, This child is a monster. They say that she is bloodthirsty, that those who speak against her are impaled on spikes to die lingering deaths. They say she is a sorceress, who mocks the gods, breaks truces, threatens envoys, and turns on those who have served her loyally. They say her lust cannot be sated, that she mates with men, women, eunuchs, even dogs and children, and woe betide the lover who fails to satisfy her. She gives her body to men to take their souls in thrall. They say, said Haldon. By they, you mean the slavers, the exiles she drove from Astapor and Meereen. Mere calumnies. I am no lady, the widow replied, just Vogaro's whore. You want to be gone from here before the tigers come. Should you reach your queen, give her a message from the slaves of old Volantis. She touched the faded scar upon her wrinkled cheek, where her tears had been cut away. Tell her we are waiting. Tell her to come soon. There is a scene of Dany enacting attacks on those who choose to sell themselves back to slavery, and it's used as proof that she is a slaver. This tax is, in fact, proposed by an ex-slave Missandei, and it's absurd to argue that an ex-slave would advise Dany to become a slaver. Have you ever heard of punitive taxes? It's a tax that is there to punish one for something, as the name suggests, and the money does not go to Dany herself, but to the city, and it's used to improve the lives of the freedmen. Someone actually tried to argue with me that Missandei actually proposed this tax as an elusive test of character, because apparently Missandei needs to additionally test Dany's character after she witnessed her liberatory campaign in Astapor. She can't be sure from that alone.
Daenerys orders children in a saber to be killed.
This comes from a line of Dany ordering all the people who wear the tokar to be killed, but to not have children under 12 harmed. Thus, she orders children over 12 to be killed. This line, like many others in Dany's chapters, is maliciously twisted to make it seem like the opposite is happening. Through this line, Dany actually recognizes children as a protected class and orders the Unsullied to not hurt them, even if they wear a tokar, which is very explicitly confirmed to be a slaver garment. Conveniently, we never hear about any children over 13 who were killed on that specific day. And considering that the slaving elite uses everything under the sun to accuse Dany of being the devil, they have that in common with her anti-fans. Somehow we never hear anyone talk about how that arrogant evil bitch killed children in Astapor. It's therefore safe to assume that there were no kids at that age wearing a tokar at that specific moment. I can't believe I have to explain this. And it's mind-blowing that people have more outrage over hypothetical slaver kids being killed than the fact that thousands of children were kidnapped from their homes, castrated and dehumanized. As always, it's clear who is considered a worthy victim and who's not. Honestly,
fuck them kids.
Daenerys is a white savior.
I have no idea in what context could Daenerys be depicted as a white savior given the term's definition. Helpline defines white savior as white people who consider themselves wonderful helpers to black, indigenous, and people of color. BIPOC. But they help for the wrong reasons, and sometimes end up doing more hurt than help. It refers to those who work from the assumption that they know best what BIPOC folks need. They believe it's their responsibility to support and uplift communities of color in their own country or somewhere else, because people of color lack the resources, will, and intelligence to do it themselves. In short, white saviors consider themselves superior, whether they realize it or not. They swoop in to make a difference without stopping to consider whether that difference may not, in fact, have more negative effects than positive ones. A white savior helps marginalized communities not out of the goodness of their heart, but because they consider themselves superior to the people they save. They get an ego trip from this. Think of white girls going to Africa and photographing themselves giving water to black babies to post on Instagram and hear platitudes about how good they are. The cons of such endeavors often outweigh the pros too. For example, white guys from America with no skills may go and volunteer to build a school in Africa, taking away opportunities from skilled natives. Dany doesn't launch her campaign because she wants to be praised, but because she herself experienced slavery and her actions stem from genuine empathy. The Giscari are also not in any way, shape or form a marginalized or downtrodden group on the basis of their ethnicity, and that is because slavery in Essos is class-based and not race-based. It affects everyone, from black Summer Islanders to white Lyseni. The Giscari regularly enslave other Giscari for their unsullied legions. Slavery isn't something only reserved for the Giscari either. While they were the first to practice it, this institution is present in most of the Essosi cities. It is wired into the economic base of the continent. One character sums it up. This arrogant child has taken it upon herself to smash the slave trade, but that traffic was never confined to Slaver's Bay. It was part of the sea of trade that spanned the world, and the Dragon Queen has clouded the water. Behind the black wall, lords of ancient blood sleep poorly, listening as their kitchen slaves sharpen their long knives. Slaves grow our food, clean our streets, teach our young. They guard our walls, row our galleys, fight our battles. And now when they look east, they see this young queen shining from afar, this breaker of chains. The old blood cannot suffer that. Poor men hate her too. Even the vilest beggar stands higher than a slave. This Dragon Queen would rob him of that consolation.
Daenerys causes chaos and destruction in Essos, proving that she's unfit to rule.
Uprooting an entire economic base of the continent would always entail chaos. It would cause chaos if it was Jon, Sansa, or whomever else doing it. There is no way to make people give up an oppressive institution by asking them nicely. Every system in history has been overthrown through a violent revolution. Slavery-based economy was replaced through a revolution. Feudalism changed into capitalism via a revolution. Socialism was introduced in the Russian Empire via a revolution. As history shows, the chaos and anarchy and destruction and revolutionary violence is as inevitable as the sky being blue. Spartacus's uprising was violent. The French Revolution was violent. The October Revolution was violent. Dany's conquest of Slavers Bay is violent. Not only that, but the freedmen are willing to accept the short-time chaos and destruction if it means their freedom. Those who complain about it the most are the slaving elite and the upper class that benefits from slavery. The freedmen call Daenerys their mother. The freedmen wait for her. The freedmen are sent into black rage when someone praises the would-be dragon slayer. The freedmen see her as a liberator. Again, the only people who express extremely negative sentiment about her on the basis of causing chaos are the slaving nobles. Why do you believe in what they say? Why do you side with them?
Daenerys uses Meereen as a way to try out being a queen instead of actually caring for the people there.
It is written plainly in the text that Dany conquers Meereen because she has almost 80,000 people following her and no way to feed them. She conquers Meereen precisely for that reason. It's that or let them starve. If she didn't do this, she would be accused of genociding them through starvation. It's a recurrent theme, just like the defense of slavery and the slaving elite. Daenerys is damned if she does, damned if she doesn't. It is also written plainly in the text that Dany stays in Meereen because she wants to avoid it turning into Astapor, where following her departure, anarchy caused reintroduction of slavery and terrible senseless chaos. The only reason why she stays is because she wants to stabilize the region enough to not let this happen again. It's not even hidden in the subtext or anything. It's literally spelled out in the text. Is this complicated? Is this difficult to comprehend? Or is this another thing that can be shrugged off as POV bias or something equally ridiculous? I don't know.
The peace in Meereen was real and Dany sabotaged it.
This reading of Dany's storyline was popularized by the series of essays The Meereenese Blood by Adam Feldman. According to Feldman, the peace was real, but Dany nevertheless insists on destroying it, since she chose fire and blood by the end of her A Dance with Dragons chapter. While those essays are the first ones to actually address the complexity of the Meereen storyline, which way too often is dismissed as boring, uninteresting and whatnot, the conclusion that the peace was real stems from a false assumption because the peace is very obviously false and Dany knows it. Grazdan, she had been forewarned, was a cousin of the Green Grace, whose support she had found invaluable. The priestess was a voice for peace, acceptance and obedience to lawful authority. This is the first sign that the peace is going to be false, because the Green Grace is the Harpy. So she was the one behind killing the freedmen and other atrocities inflicted upon them. That she supposedly advocates for peace is an obvious sign that she does not really value it, not in the way that would mean anything. In order to stop the killings conducted by the Sons of the Harpy, Dany asks for a noble child from every family and threatens that she will kill them in retaliation. The Meereenese continue their killings because they know full well that Dany will not hurt them because she values their lives. The Sons of the Harpy are laughing in their pyramids. Shakas said just this morning, "What good are hostages if you will not take their heads?" In his eyes she was only a weak woman. Hosea was enough. What good is peace if it must be purchased with the blood of little children? These murders are not their doing, Dany told the Green Grace feebly. I am no butcher queen. Indeed, what good is peace if it must be purchased with the blood of innocent children? This is another hint. Peace is my desire. You say that you can help me end the nightly slaughter in my streets. I say do it. Put an end to this shadow war, my lord. That is your quest. Give me 90 days and 90 nights without a murder, and I will know that you are worthy of a throne. Can you do that? Hizdahr looked thoughtful. 90 days and 90 nights without a corpse, and on the 91st we wed. Perhaps, said Dany with a coy look. Hisdar does succeed in stopping the killings of the freedmen. That means he knows the Harpy and is able to convince her to end these acts. He is also able to negotiate a peace agreement between Yunkai, Astapor and Meereen. Yunkai will give us peace, but for a price. The disruption of the slave trade has caused great injury throughout the civilized world. Yunkai and her allies will require an indemnity of us, to be paid in gold and gemstones. Gold and gems were easy. What else? The Yunkai will resume slaving, as before. Astapor will be rebuilt, as a slave city. You will not interfere. The peace relies on reintroducing slavery in Yunkai and Astapor, with Meereen the only one remaining free. Therefore, the Yunkai will still train little children to please people sexually. Therefore, Moran Salit will be castrated, mutilated, and killed. Is this peace? Dany's cards touched a bite. This is peace, she told herself. This is what I wanted, what I worked for. This is why I married Hisdar. So why does it taste so much like defeat? It tastes like defeat. Therefore, is this peace? They are permitting that, yes, she has replied. But their warships remain. They can close their fingers around our throat again whenever they wish. They have opened a slave market within sight of my walls. Outside our walls, sweet queen. That was a condition of the peace, that Yunkai would be free to trade in slaves as before, unmolested. The Yunkai trade in slaves under Meereen's walls solely to taunt Dany. Is this peace? A troop of Yunkish castrati owned by Rurkas Soyunkas sang them songs in the ancient tongue of the old empire, their voices high and sweet and impossibly pure. Have you ever heard such singing, my love? Hisdar asked her. They have the voices of gods, do they not? Yes, she said, though I wonder if they might not have preferred to have the fruits of men. All the entertainers were slaves. That had been part of the peace, that slave owners be allowed the right to bring the chattels into Meereen without fear of having them freed. In return, the Yunkai had promised to respect the rights and liberties of the former slaves that Dany had freed. A fair bargain, Hisdar said, but the taste it left in the queen's mouth was full. She drank another cup of wine to wash it out. The Yunkai bring castrated slave singers to perform for Dany, to remind her that they got their way. Is this peace? The fighting pits are about to reopen and a bloody spectacle will be made out of it once more. Dany insists that only the freedmen partake in those games, but it turns out to be similar to the case of Pentos. They are free in name only. We see this when Penny and Tyrion are about to fight a real lion while they are actual slaves. Only Dany's intervention prevents this. Is this peace? Why? Doubts gnawed at him. The sons had stopped their killing. Hisdar's peace is a sham. Not at first, no. The Yunkai were afraid of our queen, of her Unsullied, of her dragons. This land has known dragons before. Yurkas Zoyunkas had read his histories. He knew. Hisdar as well. Why not a peace? Daenerys wanted it. They could see that. Wanted it too much. She should have marched to Astapor. Shakas moved closer. That was before. The pit changed all. Daenerys gone. Yurkas dead. In place of one old lion, a pack of jackals. Bloodbird. That one has no taste for peace. And there is more. Wars. Volantis has launched its fleet against us. Volantis. Selma's sword hand tingled. We made a peace with Yunkai, not with Volantis. Here we have stated clear as day that the peace was never meant to last and that Volantis would have attacked Meereen anyway. Is this peace? Only you can answer that, magnificence. It might be that you wish to put another woman in her place. Ser Barristan nodded at the girl peering timidly from the bedchamber. That one, perhaps. The king looked around wildly. Her? She's nothing. A bed slave. He raised his hands. I misspoke. Not a slave. A free woman. Trained in pleasure. Even a king has needs. She is none of your concern, sir. Hisdar at first seems to be something of a shavepate. He seems to welcome Dany's changes and wants to be a part of it, but his true nature is revealed when Dany leaves the city. He merely used her to get the power over other noble families, and when she's absent, Barristan finds him with a bed slave. Therefore, all his talks about changes were nothing. He is still a slaver. Is this peace?
Daenerys forces Westerosi values on the Giscari and destroys their culture. She is xenophobic and prejudiced against the Giscari.
Being against slavery is hardly something exclusive to Westerosi. The Braavosi despise slavery as well, and they are indigenous to Essos. Moreover, to claim that slavery is okay because it's just part of someone's culture is disgusting and is used to keep hegemonic oppressive powers in place even in the real world. This argument can be used to justify just about everything. It's just a part of someone's culture to be an anti-Semite. It's just a part of someone's culture to kill women to cleanse one's honor. It's just a part of someone's culture to commit genocide. It's just a part of someone's culture to divide people into castes and abuse those who are in the lowest one. And so on and so forth. Culture is not a shield to be used to defend bigotry. Dany dislikes the Giscari culture that is not related to slavery, yet she tries to assimilate to it, where Setokar has a traditional Giscari wedding ceremony.
Daenerys is delusional, not self-aware. An unreliable narrator, her chapters are riddled with pop traps. We don't see Daenerys from other points of view. Therefore, we cannot trust her perception of events. She only thinks she's doing something good.
Every character is to some degree unreliable. Jon, Tyrion, Catelyn, Bran, Arya, Cersei. Theon and the rest of the gang. The only character to be explicitly called an unreliable narrator by the author is Sansa, yet the accusation of unreliable narration is most often leveraged against Daenerys. The reason is that Dany's chapters are pretty straightforward, and she fights against something that to any remotely decent person would be abhorrent: slavery. But because she is so hated, one has to find a reason to justify this hatred, and that's difficult if a character you hate is selflessly fighting against such a fundamentally immoral institution. So the situation has to be twisted. It turns out that she only maliciously uses slavery as a pretext to amass power, or that she only sees herself as a liberator while everyone else doesn't, and we don't know because of POV trap, or that her intentions are not truly noble. She just does this as an ego trip. This of course doesn't make sense. For Dany to abandon her goals of winning the throne and instead end slavery means to make a huge sacrifice. She sacrifices resources, time, and even her own sexual autonomy to improve the situation. None of this is giving her any advantages, quite the opposite. Literally the only reason why she conquers Meereen is because she is followed by 80,000 freedmen and has to feed them or abandon them to a terrible fate. It's also incorrect to say that we never see Dany outside of her POV. We see her through the eyes of Barristan and Quentyn, and both of them have a positive opinion on her. Barristan spent years serving people who did not deserve it, and in Daenerys he found renewed purpose. He believes in her and follows her because he finally found someone worthy of following. Unless you also claim that Barristan is biased or that she bewitched him in some way, how would you explain this? Not only that, but we get the insight into how the freedmen see her. They literally wait for her, love her, consider her their mother. What is even more, this is literally one of the arguments that the slaving elite uses against her, that she just made everything worse and only she believes herself to be righteous, while everyone else hates her, including even the former slaves. Again, the readers subconsciously side with the slaving elite.
Daenerys is arrogant.
Daenerys is the very opposite of arrogant. I will not sit in the Harpy's lap, she told them. Instead she sat upon a simple ebony bench. It served, though she had heard the Meereenese muttering that it did not befit a queen. If Dany was arrogant, she would sit on an elaborate throne and not a simple bench. Half a year gone, that man could scarcely wake fire from dragonglass. He had some small skill with powders and wildfire, sufficient to entrance a crowd while his cutpurses did their work. He could walk across hot coals and make burning roses bloom in the air, but he could no more aspire to climb the fiery ladder than a common fisherman could hope to catch a kraken in his nets. Dany looked uneasily at where the ladder had stood. Even the smoke was gone now, and the crowd was breaking up, each man going about his business. In a moment more than a few would find their purses flat and empty. And now? And now his powers grow, Khaleesi. And you are the cause of it. Me? Dany laughed. How could that be? Dany doesn't believe that she could be the cause of magic returning. If she was arrogant, she would immediately say something like, of course. In the afternoon, a sculptor came, proposing to replace the head of the great bronze harpy in the Plaza of Purification with one cast in Dany's image. She denied him with as much courtesy as she could muster. If Dany was arrogant, she would want to be flattered by that sculpture.
Daenerys sees herself as a savior and wants everyone to worship her.
Dany doesn't see herself as a savior, and if she did, she would be right. Dany thinks that she is merely doing her duty as a queen. Soon Dany was as clean as she was ever going to be. She pushed herself to her feet, splashing softly. Water ran down her legs and bedded on her breasts. The sun was climbing up the sky, and her people would soon be gathering. She would rather have drifted in the fragrant pool all day, eating iced fruit of silver trays, and dreaming of a house with a red door, but the queen belongs to her people, not to herself. I was alone for a long time, Jorah. All alone but for my brother. I was such a small scared thing. Viserys should have protected me, but instead he hurt me and scared me worse. He shouldn't have done that. He wasn't just my brother, he was my king. Why do the gods make kings and queens, if not to protect the ones who can't protect themselves? Some kings make themselves. Robert did. He was no true king. Dany said scornfully. He did no justice. Justice. That's what kings are for. Dany wants to be worshipped by whom exactly? Give me one name, one line that proves that. I failed to find any.
GRRM tries to trick us into liking Daenerys, and he's experimenting on how people are attracted to tyrants.
If so, then I commend him for the grift. To keep this facade for 3 decades is an incredible feat, not only in the books he writes, but also in the interviews when he lies without as much as blinking. On the Dance with Dragons cover, I put Daenerys at the top of the stairs of the Merenis pyramid. George told me that Daenerys wants equality for everyone. She wants to be at the same level as her people, so I had to climb down to keep it consistent. He even wrote another book where one of the characters hates slavery just to prepare the ground for this trickery. I never held much with slavery. You can't just go using another kind of people like they wasn't people at all. Know what I mean? Got to end sooner or later. Better if it ends peaceful. But it's got to end, even if it has to be with fire and blood, you see? Maybe that's what them abolitionists been saying all along. You try to be reasonable. That's only right. But if it don't work, you got to be ready. Some things is just wrong. They got to be ended. He really tricked us into siding with a former bridal slave who ends a continent-wide institution of slavery. Such is his master plan.
Daenerys is temperamental, impulsive, hot-headed, doesn't know how to be civil and diplomatic.
Yes, sometimes. And there's one common denominator every time she lets her violent impulses win. When the well-being of her loved ones is threatened. She resorts to violence only to protect them or retaliate against the harm caused to them. She resorts to violence against Miri because she killed her child. She resorts to violence against slavers because they mutilated and dehumanized the unsullied and upheld the abominable institution of slavery. She has the wine seller's daughters sharply questioned because she needs names of the people who killed Starward's shield. This is when she resorts to violence, in defense of others, which is the polar opposite of whatever everyone else is doing in the series. Dany never once punishes someone for insulting her. In A Storm of Swords, Krasus Monaclos continuously insults her and her homeland, yet Daenerys keeps the act of not knowing Valerian and doesn't explode in anger. She similarly does not do anything against someone who spats on her. If she was truly so impulsive and hot-headed, she would act here and there, insult someone back, hit them, order them to be tortured, etc. Dany is by far the only character in the series who only resorts to violence in defense of others, save for maybe Arya. Everyone else does this for their own benefit. Yet it is Dany who is always the focus of such accusations. Because again, a completely different set of standards is reserved solely for her.
Daenerys blindly trusts Dario Naharis, and this proves that she's stupid and naive.
Dany doesn't trust Dario at all. She was a queen, and Dario Naharis was not the staff of kings. He is a monster. A gallant monster, but a monster still. He has a southwards conscience. That is to say, none at all. If he did not betray her, he would master her. She did not know which of these she feared the most. I would given up my crown if he asked it of me, Dany thought. But he had not asked it. And never would. Dario might whisper words of love when the two of them were as one, but she knew it was the Dragon Queen he loved. If I gave up my crown, he would not want me. Besides, kings who lost their crowns oft lost their heads as well, and she could see no reason why it would be any different for a queen. Hate towards Dario and aversion towards this relationship or Dany's crush on him also smells bad to me. Whether you like it or not, Dario is the first man Daenerys actually chooses as her lover. Well, as much as a 15-year-old can consent to a presumably adult guy, but you know how George is with character ages, and you get what I mean. Drogo obviously owned her as a slave and raped her nightly. Jorah very clearly breaks Dany's boundaries on numerous occasions, while Dario is a lover that she chose herself, and it's the first time that violence and coercion is not involved. So, yeah, the vitriol against Dario and this relationship is very fishy to me, especially in the fandom that loves glorifying women's gendered suffering so much.
Daenerys is going crazy or is already crazy.
I made a video about it, but why not go about it once more? First, the assumption relies on pretty eugenical thinking according to which if your parents were a certain way, then you're going to be like them, and there is nothing you can do about it. Even if Dany is acting like a polar opposite of Aerys, then it is assumed that she is doomed to become like him one way or another. This is a terrible thing to peddle, not to mention that it borders on biological determinism. Since Dany never knew Aerys, never observed him, and never had a chance to repeat his patterns of behavior, it is solely assumed that she will turn into him because she has his genes. Secondly, if we are to treat Daenerys as a time bomb ready to explode with madness the second it's convenient for the plot, then we need to apply completely different moral standards to her and her alone. Jon can execute people for not following orders. Tyrion can use wildfire as a weapon of mass destruction. Stannis can burn people alive for not following his religion, and so on and so forth. But Dany doing any of the more violent actions for infinitely more selfless reasons is considered to be foreshadowing of her madness. It seems like everyone can use violence but Dany can't, even if that violence is revolutionary. Dany alone has to somehow be above it. Thirdly, there is no way to divorce Dany's supposed foreshadowing of madness and her campaign to end slavery. If one thinks that her campaign has to end with madness and large-scale violence against innocent in King's Landing, then the campaign against slavery has to be its predecessor. Well, if we're being real, it's already used to argue that. For example, Dany crucifying slavers who tortured children just to taunt her is already used as foreshadowing of her madness.
Daenerys is obsessed with the throne.
If this was true, Dany would purchase Unsullied, ignore Meereen and Yunkai and sail straight to Westeros. Instead, she frees the Unsullied and decides to free the Yankish and Meereenese slaves as well. In order to not leave the Meereenese freedmen to the fate of Astapor, she remains in Meereen and tries to rule it as best as she can. Not only that, but what Dany actually wants is not the throne, but a simple life, a home and a family. She believes that as the last Targaryen, her duty is to reclaim the throne. If I were not the blood of the dragon, she thought wistfully, this could be my home. She was Khaleesi, she had a strong man and a swift horse, handmaids to serve her, warriors to keep her safe, an honored place in the Dosh Khalin awaiting her when she grew old. And in her womb grew a son who would one day bestride the world. That should be enough for any woman. But not for the dragon. With Viserys gone, Daenerys was the last, the very last. She was the seed of kings and conquerors, and so too the child inside her. She must not forget. If she had been some ordinary woman, she would gladly have spent her whole life touching Daario, tracing his scars, and making him tell her how he would come by everyone. I would give up my crown if he asked of me, Dany thought. But he had not asked it. And never would.
Daenerys loves to be flattered and believes in every empty flattery thrown her way.
Quite the opposite. Let us speak instead of love, of dreams and desire and Daenerys, the fairest woman in this world. I am drunk with the sight of you. She was no stranger to the overblown courtesies of Karth. If you are drunk, blame the wine. She does not believe Xaro's flattery, nor is she particularly thrilled to hear it.
Daenerys rejected Quentyn because she is racist and shallow.
Daenerys rejected Quentyn because she was already betrothed to Hisdar, hoping that the marriage will help mend Meereen's wounds. A marriage with Quentyn would actually greatly benefit her, but she chooses loyalty to the freedmen that are getting slaughtered left and right, and only Hisdar can prevent this. That she does not find Quentyn attractive, and that Quentyn is Dornish is entirely irrelevant. Not only that, but she marries Hisdar, whom many people also consider a person of color. So she's racist, but only against the Dornish who, by the way, are conceptualized as Southern Europeans by the author himself.
Daenerys always had people tell her to do the right thing, while Jon always did the right thing.
This argument was pointed out to me by one of my subscribers. Out of all the ridiculous arguments that I saw, this one takes the cake. Probably because it comes from the showrunners of the direct adaptation of A Song of Ice and Fire, and it's contradicted by their own show. That they wrote. Now, it's true that D&D reduced a lot of positive qualities that Dany has and made her more violent and ruthless, while they removed a lot of anger and darkness from Jon. But nevertheless, that statement is false even in the context of the show. It is Daenerys herself who launches her anti-slavery campaign in Season 3, she is not talked into it by Jorah or Barristan. It is Dany herself who decides to save Jon in Season 7. Tyrion, in fact, advises her against. These morons contradict their own story. Not to mention that it has a misogynistic angle because, of course, Dany is juxtaposed as a hysterical harpy against a righteous male hero who himself was not often necessarily doing the right thing.
Daenerys needs to be taught a lesson about the dangers of wielding dragons as weapons of mass destruction.
Dany was already taught that lesson with the death of Hosea. It's the reason why she locked her dragons to rot in darkness. It's her reluctance to give fire and blood to the slavers that causes her so much problems in the first place. Why would she be taught a lesson she already comprehended?
If I look back, I am lost is a mantra used by Daenerys to avoid responsibility.
If I look back, I am lost is a mantra used by Daenerys to cope with the unimaginable trauma that she faced. She uses it for the first time after she loses Rhaego and Drogo. No, Mirri Maz Duur said. That was a lie you told yourself. You knew the price. Had she? If I look back, I am lost. Then, after she learns about what happened to Eroe, a girl she tried to save, but failed. It was her fate, Khaleesi, said Aggo. If I look back, I am lost. Then, before she has to euthanize Drogo. Inside the tent, Dany found a cushion, soft silk stuffed with feathers. She clutched it to her breasts as she walked back out to Drogo, to her sun and stars. If I look back, I am lost. It hurt even to walk, and she wanted to sleep and not to dream. She knelt, kissed Drogo on the lips, and pressed the cushion down across his face.
Daenerys solves all her problems with dragonfire.
Daenerys only uses dragonfire once, against Krasn's Monaclos. Her problems in Meereen stem precisely from the fact that she is unwilling to use dragonfire to solve her problems. This is why she locks them up. If this was true, she would burn all of the slave masters the moment she stepped in Meereen.
Daenerys was not justified in her actions against Mirri, and besides, Mirri was actually innocent.
A new argument that popped up in recent times is that the situation with Mirri Maz Duur was not the way it actually was. It is argued that Mirri Maz Duur did not in fact wish to harm Drogo, Daenerys or Rhaego, and that all of this was just a big misunderstanding and that Dany killed an innocent woman. Now, everyone who actually read these books remembers that Mirri admits to the fact that she killed Rhaego and gives a justification. She wanted to prevent the stallion who mounts the word prophecy from being fulfilled. The appendix for all of the books from A Clash of Kings acknowledge that Rhaego was killed by Mirri Maz Duur. The chapters where all of this happens are chaotic and strange, but what happens is that Mirri had to work her way around to get revenge. There are broadly two ways in which this could have happened. Either Mirri intentionally gave Drogo instructions that she knew he wouldn't follow, or she poisoned the wound to kill him. Rhaego was definitely killed by Mirri, and how that happens is vague as well. Dany asks Mirri for assistance during her labor, and when she begins the ritual, Rhaego is alive. The midwives refuse to come help Dany, so Jorah enters the tent so that Mirri can help with the delivery. Whatever the logistics of this, Mirri killed Rhaego. While Mirri herself comes from an understandable place when it comes to wishing harm to Drogo, what she actually did was take out her anger at him on someone who was in a similar position to her, a child bridal slave who was herself completely powerless. Daenerys tried to help Mirri as best as she could in the position that she was in. As, I repeat, a 14-year-old pregnant bridal slave. If Mirri killed Drogo, then honestly more power to her, but taking out her anger on an innocent baby and his 14-year-old mother is inexcusable, and whoever tries to argue that Mirri was justified is a vile misogynist. Mirri actually caused more harm to innocent people than to Drogo. Drogo just dies, while Dany loses her child, is rendered infertile, and her lack of protection causes Eroe to get gun-raped and killed.
Daenerys was handed her dragons.
Daenerys was handed 3 rocks, and she figured out how to make them alive, losing a child and a husband in the process. You know who was handed something just like that? These Starks, who just so happened to stumble across a dead direwolf and exactly the amount of puppies they need.
Daenerys is complicit in Drogo's actions.
If Daenerys is complicit in Drogo's actions, then Jeyne Poole is complicit in Ramsay's actions. Sansa is complicit in Tyrion's actions, and so on. All 3 were child brides of similar age, married off against their will. Their husbands did terrible atrocities, yet only Dany is considered equally to blame for them. And if you want to make arguments that Dany is complicit because Drogo does this to fund her conquest, then why not apply this reasoning to Sansa and Robb? Because Robb's army does war crimes on behalf of the Starks, including for Sansa herself, and contrary to Dany, Sansa does nothing to stop this or alleviate this in any limited capacity that she may have, where Dany tries and the narrative punishes her for it.
Daenerys will undoubtedly be the final villain of this series.
A Game of Thrones opens with evil-eyed zombies making a grand return and ends with Daenerys waking dragons out of stone. This is the most straightforward imaginary possible. I know that many people dislike the magical aspects of this story, which is baffling in and of itself, since this is a fantasy story and it has always been a fantasy story. The TV show heavily downplayed these elements in favor of making it a period drama with dragons, which is one of the reasons why the finale was so poorly received. The long night was literally the length of a regular night. A bunch of side characters died to seemingly rise the stakes, but everyone from the main cast survived. The Night King was hyped as an absolute menace who is able to raise everyone from the dead and is somehow fireproof, even though fire works perfectly well on other whites. And yet Arya manages to sneak in between his bodyguards unnoticed and kills him with one precise stab in such an anticlimactic way that I remember that my mom bursted in hysterical laughter when we were watching it. I remember that when the show was airing, people were making co-predictions according to which the Night King would make a grand return, but he didn't. The show decided that Daenerys will be the final surprising, expectation-subverting villain. She will snap and kill everyone in the second to last episode, and then will be put down like all the other, and that's it. What I'm trying to say is that downplaying the magical elements of the story was the reason why the ending was received so poorly. This does not only apply to the Long Night and the White Walker threat, but it's by far the most emblematic of these problems. I find it peculiar how, to this day, people disparage the show ending, but then insist that the books will end in the exact same way, only that George R.R. Martin will handle it better. But the problem isn't with how it was written, but in the fact that it was written in the first place. If, before Season 8, you told the big-name fans that you think the books will end with the White Walker threat solved in a heartbeat, and Dany's quest for the throne will be the last storyline, they would laugh in your face. Then, after the finale aired, everyone agreed that it made no sense and was terrible, and yet they started acting like this order of events will be present in the books as well. Always prefaced with, but it's fine, because George will write it brilliantly. So did you hate this ending or not? Seems to me like you actually loved it. The real enemy is the cold, says the prologue of A Game of Thrones. And people insist that the real enemy is a former bridal slave who tries to abolish slavery. This is supposed to be a compelling, amazing narrative. Luckily to all of us, George R.R. Martin hasn't lost his mind and already confirmed that his ending will be different in summer of 2022. The struggle in the north and its aftermath will be the very last arc of the story, and if you insist otherwise, then you misunderstood the most fundamental theme of this story. A Song of Ice and Fire will not end with A Game of Thrones.
Daenerys forces rape victims to marry their rapists. Daenerys is a rape apologist who idolizes her rapist husband.
These accusations come from when Dany witnesses the Lazaran woman being raped and tries to negotiate a way to stop this. He says the Khaleesi has taken his spoils, a daughter of the lambs who was his to mount. Khal Drogo's face was still and hard, but his black eyes were curious as they went to Dany. Tell me the truth of this, moon of my life, he commanded in the Dothraki. Dany told him what she had done, in his own tongue, so the Khal would understand her better, her words simple and direct. When she was done, Drogo was frowning. This is the way of war. These women are our slaves now, to do as we please. It pleases me to hold them safe. Dany said, wondering if she had dared too much. If your warriors would mourn these women, let them take them gently and keep them for wives. Give them places in the Kalasar and let them bear you sons. Dany is 14, pregnant and vulnerable. At one point she even wonders if maybe she went too far. Drogo's men in the Kalasar are visibly angry at Dany stopping the rapes. If Drogo wasn't there, she could be killed, hurt, or raped for what she does. She takes a huge risk and tries to negotiate a way to keep the women safe without having their anger directed at herself and others. Dany doesn't force anyone, it is her suggestion, a way to soften the blow, to not further endanger them or herself. This is the best she could do in the position that she was in. This is how the author himself frames it.
And Dany here is appalled by the rape and slaughter that she's seeing. Khal Drogo is moving. He's taken his Khalasar toward the sea to begin the conquest of Westeros, but it's quite a way to the sea, and of course they have to be fed, and when they reach the sea, they're going to need a way to get these ships to take them across. So slaving is one of the ways that the Dothraki earn money, although they don't look at it earn, they look at it as an exchange of gifts. The Dothraki do not actually believe in buying and selling in the same way as the more mercantile civilizations of the West. So Dany can't enact the idea of don't take slaves, but what she does there is saying, well, I'll take the slaves. I'm the queen. I'm the Khaleesi. All the slaves belong to me. And in that way, she can extend some protection over the women who were being raped.
To hold against Dany that she idolizes her rapist husband is so abhorrent and disgusting that I truly have no words for it. Because her husband rapes her. She is his victim. You hold against her that she developed Stockholm Syndrome. If you said this about any other female character in asoiaf, you would be crucified, but if it's Dany, then that's fine and dandy. That's horrifying.
Daenerys will throw a temper tantrum when she's rejected by Westeros?
It's not set in stone that Dany will even be rejected in Westeros, but in any case, if she is, then she would not throw a temper tantrum because she is aware that her conquest won't be easy. The realm will rise for its rightful king. Tyrell, Redwyne, Darry, Greyjoy, they have no more love for the usurper than I do. The Dornishmen burn to avenge Alia and her children, and the small folk will be with us. They cry out for their king. He looked at Illyrio anxiously. They do, don't they? They are your people, and they love you well, Magister Illyrio said amiably. In holdfasts all across the realm, men lift sacred toasts to your health, while women sew dragon banners and hide them against the day of your return from across the water. He gave a massive shrug. Or so my agents tell me. Then he had no agents, no way of knowing what anyone was doing or thinking across the narrow sea, but she mistrusted Illyrio's sweet words, as she mistrusted everything about Illyrio. Mind you, this is her first chapter ever, and she's 13. My queen, said Arstan. There have been no slaves in the Seven Kingdoms for thousands of years. The old gods and the new alike hold slavery to be an abomination, evil. If you should land in Westeros at the head of a slave army, many good men will oppose you for no other reason than that. You will do great harm to your cause, and to the honor of your house. Yet I must have some army, Dany said. The boy Joffrey will not give me the Iron Throne for asking politely. When the day comes that you raise your banners, half of Westeros will be with you, Whitebird promised. Your brother Rhaegar is still remembered, with great love. And my father, Dany said. The old man hesitated before saying, King Aerys is also remembered. He gave the realm many years of peace. Your Grace, you have no need of slaves. Magister Illyrio can keep you safe while your dragons grow, and send secret envoys across the narrow sea on your behalf, to sound out the High Lords for your cause. The same High Lords who abandoned my father to the Kingslayer, and bend the knee to Robert the Usurper. Even those who bend their knees might yearn in their hearts for the return of the dragons. May, said Dany. That was such a slippery word. May. In any language. Why would someone this self-aware expect to be welcomed with open arms and be mad when she isn't universally adored?
Daenerys chose fire and blood and forgot Hasia's name. Therefore she will slaughter innocent people in King's Landing and will go on the path of madness.
Dany chose to give fire and blood to the slavers, as she should have from the beginning. She forgot Hasia's name as she was starving, suffering from disease and dying. I guess she can be judged for her actions in any context, and no context could ever be good enough to cut her some goddamn slack. As funny and absurd as these arguments can be, this deep dive caused me to feel uneasy. Writing the script was not only very tiring and time-consuming due to searching for arguments, debunking them, and finding relevant book quotes and interviews to support my claims, but I feel drained more so because I realize the sheer scale of these lies, and because I'm too aware of the numerous terrifying implications they carry. Daenerys was so completely twisted from her true self that only a tiny handful of people truly understand her character. Reddit, Quora, YouTube, Tumblr, Twitter, those places are full of people repeating those bogus claims without blinking, which causes other people to repeat it after them, and those misconceptions are cemented as canon, as fact, as undeniable. I long wondered why that is. We all seemingly read the same story, yet Daenerys is so drastically misrepresented by the fans that it seems like she is in the story for no reason at all. To just be killed, to just fill page counts, to just hatch her dragons and then give them to someone else, or better yet, have them killed as a cautionary tale, to just trick the audience in some convoluted way. Characters are usually flattened in the fandom perception, reduced to 2-3 personality traits and whatnot, but it's rare to see a character be turned into someone completely different by a large chunk of the fans. The hatred she receives is unlike anything I have ever seen. I don't think I have ever witnessed any character being met with such vitriolic hatred, aside from maybe Skylar White. But these two are completely different people, and in the case of Skylar, one does not have to twist her entire being, all of her motivations, all of her character actions to justify that hatred. In the case of Dany, people dedicate their entire online presence to finding new ways to make her into fantasy Hitler. They make dedicated blogs solely to dissect every word from her chapters into a secret manipulation and side of villainy. They make hours upon hours of YouTube content about how she is the evilest fictional character ever. They call her a rapist, a colonizer, an imperialist, a blood purist, a Nazi, a slaver, a racist, a rape apologist, a xenophobe. It seems that even those who claim to like her, or even genuinely like her, are not free from repeating those misconceptions, including myself, since I for a long time believed that, as amazing as Dany is, she is going to die, killed by Jon, for the crime of accidentally setting King's Landing on fire. Her upcoming downfall is considered to be as inevitable as the Hodor reveal. Second reason is just the sheer amount of the defense of slavery that I witnessed. You might notice that I got pretty personal in this video. Usually I try to avoid speaking in the first person in my videos, but in that case I abandoned this because I know full well that even though slavery is no longer a prevailing mode of production, it still exists and my family was affected by it in the living memory. I'm not an American, I'm actually from Eastern Europe, and during World War II, my own great-grandfather was enslaved by the Nazis and forced to perform forced labor for them, alongside millions of Slavs and Jews. To this day, women from Eastern Europe are mass trafficked to the West to be sex slaves, including from my country. To this day, the Gulf monarchies force vulnerable migrant workers from Southeast Asia to perform slave labor for them. This was a hot topic during the Qatar Games, since it was known to essentially everyone that these stadiums were built by blood and tears of slave migrant workers who often died in unsafe conditions or due to overworking. It's fitting that the mascot was a ghost. As personal as it is for me, I cannot imagine how Black Americans, descendants of chattel slavery, feel when they see these arguments. And you might argue that this is just fiction, that Dany isn't real, but it's disturbing that these are virtually indistinguishable from the ones used during the American Civil War. But economy, but stability, but culture. And you might argue that it's just fiction, that Dany isn't real, and yet people's first instinct is to side with the status quo. People's first instinct is to defend the slave owners. People's first instinct is to twist everything to make Dany seem evil for about the most selfless thing anyone in this series has ever done. Over the years, people realized that it's bad optics to cry about the economy or disparage Dany for ending slavery, and this is where actually she is a slaver herself arguments started popping up. These are just to hide the true nature of that hatred and give oneself plausible deniability. Nothing else. Thanks for watching. Remember that if you like my content, like, comment, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. And don't forget to comment with all the other arguments that you've seen.
Mm-hmm.